Hey friends, welcome back. My name is Shelly with the Vintage Hen and Chick, and today I'm sharing 4 easy thrift flips for beginners using the brand new IOD Summer 2025 release. These trash to treasure DIYs are budget friendly, creative, and all the new IOD goodies are available right now on my website, thevintagehenandchick.com. Now let's get started. For project 1, I have this old metal bucket with a handle and a lid. It's been in my stash for a really long time, and I thought this project today would be the perfect piece for the project. So we're going to start out with the first new product in the release, and that is the IOD Chanticleer mold. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be casting a mold with my IOD clay. But first of all, I need to get my mold ready for the clay. And for that, I'm just going to take a little bit of cornstarch and a small paintbrush and brush the inside of my mold with the cornstarch. And what this is going to do is it's going to help the mold release the clay when we're all done. And so I'm going to take my IOD clay and I'm going to kind of warm it up in my hands a little bit, flatten it out, and start pressing it into my mold. And one thing about the IOD molds is they have this micro rim around each mold. And what that does is it helps you rub your fingers across your mold to clean off the excess clay around the outside of your mold. You can see that I'm kind of rubbing my fingers over the mold and that excess clay is coming off. So I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to press the mold down, make sure my back is flattened, and then once that's done, I'm going to take the mold and I'm going to turn it upside down. And I'm just going to let gravity kind of do its thing, and that's going to help the mold along with the cornstarch just kind of fall out of the mold. So I'm going to take my casting out of the mold and then we'll move on to the next step. I have my casting ready and now I'm going to apply it to my can, and for that I'm going to use my Titebond Quick and Thick glue. My casting is still wet, the clay is not dry yet, and so I'm just going to take my Titebond and I'm going to put it on the back of my casting. I'm going to use a small paintbrush to spread the glue out. You want to make sure that you get your glue all the way to the edges of your casting, and then I'm going to lay my casting down on my can and get it positioned where I want it to be. Now the Titebond doesn't take very long to dry. It takes about 15 minutes. And so I'm going to get my casting attached to my can with the glue, and then I'm going to take a couple of pieces of painter's tape to hold my casting in place while we wait for the Titebond to dry. I let my glue dry for about 15 minutes and I carefully removed the painter's tape. Now keep in mind the clay is still wet yet, and now I'm going to paint it with Dixie Belle's Ecru chalk paint, and I like to paint my clay castings while the clay is still wet. It just kind of helps so that your casting doesn't crack as much. So I'm just going to take my paint, I'm going to give this 2 good coats of paint. I'm going to let it dry thoroughly in between each coat, and then once the 2 coats of paint are dry, then we'll move on to the next step. I gave the can and the lid 2 good coats of my paint, making sure that I got in all the details on that casting. And now we're going to apply a transfer, and this is from the Home Sweet Home transfer set. And I just cut out the transfer that I'm going to use. And now with all transfers, they're very easy to use. You just peel off the transfer backing and then place the transfer where you want it to be on your project. And then you just take your transfer tool that comes in all the transfer kits and you start gently rubbing over your transfer. And what this is doing is it's getting your transfer attached to your project below. Then you start on one side of the transfer, work your way to the other side, and slowly start to remove the transfer vellum as you're still rubbing over the transfer with your transfer tool. Once you have your transfer completely attached to your project piece, then you take either your hands or the transfer vellum and rub it over your transfer. And this is burnishing your transfer in, making sure everything is nice and attached and there's no bubbles and no wrinkles. Now everything needs to be sealed in, and for that I'm going to be using the Sweet Pickins oil wax in the color dark, and I like to just pour a little bit of the oil wax in a plastic cup, and I like to use either my sponge daubers or sponge brushes when I'm applying the oil wax. It goes on nice and easy, and then you can just throw the brush away when you're done. So I'm just taking my dauber, dipping it in my oil wax, and then applying it all over the can. And I'm making sure that I get my oil wax in all those details and all those crevices of my clay casting. So I'm going to continue to add the wax to my can and the lid. I'm going to set it aside for about 15 minutes to let that wax really absorb into the paint, and then we'll move on to the next step. I let the oil wax sit on the project for about 15 minutes to let it really absorb into that paint. And now I'm just simply taking a paper towel and wiping off the excess wax on the lid and on the can. It's very easy. You just want to use a paper towel, wipe off all the excess until you have everything off and your project is kind of dry to the touch. You're still going to feel a little bit of wetness once you have your wax all wiped off, but you want it to be almost completely dry. So I'm going to continue to use my paper towel and wipe everything off, and then this project is complete. For project 2, I have this wooden tray. I picked this up at a garage sale for $2, and I liked the stain that's already on the tray, and I thought it would look really good with a paint inlay on it. So I'm going to be using the IOD Ditzy Blooms paint inlay on this tray. And what I did is on each of the boards on this tray, I cut a different strip of pattern from the Ditzy Blooms paint inlay set. And I'm going to apply a different pattern on each of these slats. And so what I'm going to do, if you've never applied a paint inlay before, I'm going to apply these with my Dixie Belle Clear Coat Satin. You can do it with paint or you can do it with clear top coat. I'm going to do it with the top coat today. And so you just apply a good coat of your clear coat on the area where you're going to be applying your paint inlay. You want to get a good coat down first, and then you're going to take your paint inlay and your mister bottle, and you want to spritz the painted side of the inlay just to get that paint starting to activate right away. And once you have your piece of paint inlay misted on the paint side and your layer of clear coat on your project, then you're just going to take your paint inlay and lay it down where you've applied your clear coat. Once you get it laid down, then you want to spritz it again with your mister bottle of water. And then I just take a dry paper towel and I dab up any excess water that's on the back of my inlay. And while I'm dabbing up that water, I'm also pressing my inlay into that clear coat. That's actual paint on that inlay, and you want that paint to attach to that clear coat. So I'm going to continue this process over the entire board. I'm going to lay a layer of my top coat down first. Then I'm going to take my piece of paint inlay and I'm going to spritz it with water on the paint side of the inlay. Once I have that done, then I'm going to lay my inlay down, paint side down onto the area where I applied my clear coat, and then I'm going to take my mister bottle and spritz the top of the inlay and then use my paper towel and press down on the inlay while I'm dabbing up the excess water that I just misted on the inlay. I'm going to continue with the rest of the board and applying my strips of the paint inlay in the exact same process that I did with the previous ones. The paint inlays are dried to the touch now. You can see the color difference between the dry inlays and the wet inlays. And now I'm just going to take my mister bottle and mist all of the dried inlays with water. And then I'm going to take a dry paper towel and mop up any excess standing water. And then you just start from one end of the inlay and go to the other and peel it back. And you will see the beautiful paint inlay that has adhered to your project. So I'm going to continue to remove all of these inlays, and then we will move on and finish the rest of this board with the other pieces of inlay. The paint inlays in this kit do come in a continuous pattern, so I just cut pieces of inlay to finish off the board, matching up the pattern, and I'm going to do the exact same process that I did before, laying down my top coat, misting my paint inlay, and then laying it down and matching up the pattern as best I can. And so I'm going to do that with all sections of the board, adding the rest of the inlay, and then I'll set this aside to dry, and once it's dry, then they will be removed just like we did with the inlays on the other side of the board. These pieces of inlay are completely dry. I'm going to do the exact same process. Mist them with my mister bottle, take my dry paper towel, mop up any excess water, and then peel back the inlay. And once I have all of the inlays applied, I am going to let this board set aside for quite a while to make sure that that paint from the inlay completely dries before I top coat it. I like the handles on this board. I thought they were a little too bright. I thought the gold was a little too bright. So I'm just going to take some Dixie Belle white wax and apply it to the handles to tone down that gold a little bit. And I want the wax to really highlight the details in the handles because there is a lot of beautiful details in these handles. So I'm just going to apply the white wax over the handles, and then I'm going to take a dry paper towel or a dry cloth and I'm going to buff back the excess wax. And you'll see that it really tones down that bright gold color and it really highlights the details on these beautiful handles. My paint inlays have dried really well, and now it's time to seal them. And so I'm going to be using my Dixie Belle Clear Coat in the satin finish. Now, one thing to note when you're sealing your paint inlays, it is paint on there, so you can smear the paint if you're not careful. So what I always do is I put a lot of product on my brush and I use a light hand when I'm sealing over the inlays, just to kind of reduce the risk of smearing that paint. If this makes you nervous, if you think you're going to smear your paint using a brush, you can absolutely take a spray can sealer and spray it that way. So I'm going to continue to seal in the entire board with my top coat, and then this project is complete. Project number 3 is this 15-inch wood round. I get mine at Menards. I'm sure you can find them at Home Depot or Lowe's or any kind of store like that. And I'm going to take the wood round and I'm going to paint it with Dixie Belle's olive wood. I'm going to give it 2 good coats. These wood rounds, the wood is really dry. So I'm going to give it 2 coats because the first coat is really just going to soak into that dry wood. And I'm going to paint the top, the back, and the sides of this wood round. I'm going to let it dry thoroughly in between each coat, and then we'll move on to the next step. I applied 2 coats of paint to the wood round. I let it dry completely, and then I did take it into my garage and use my orbital sander on it and distress the wood round. I really wanted the outside edges to be distressed. And now I'm going to be applying a transfer. And for this project, I'm going to be using the brand new Emporium Gilded Transfer from IOD. And I just cut out the chunk of transfer that I want to use ahead of time. And it's this beautiful gold scripted lettering. I thought it would look really nice with this color of paint. And so with the gilded transfers, they're very similar to the regular IOD transfers, but they're a little bit different in application in that you don't have to rub as hard. And so you just lay your gilded transfer down, you use your transfer tool, and you rub over the transfer just like you would with a regular transfer. But like I said, you don't need to rub as hard with these gilded transfers. And then it's the exact same process. You start from one side of the transfer and peel back the transfer as you're rubbing with your transfer tool. And then once I have this transfer applied to my surface, I typically want to burnish it in, but I'm not going to use the transfer sheet to burnish in the gilded transfers. I like to use my hands and press the transfer down and make sure everything is adhered nicely to my surface. I have my gilded transfer applied, and now I'm going to be layering transfers on top of this. And for that, I'm using transfers from the IOD St. Germain transfer set. And I have cut out the transfers that I want to use on this wood round, and I'm going to put one in the middle, and then I'm going to put two on the sides. And so layering transfers is very easy. You just do the exact same process you would do when you're applying a transfer on any other surface. You lay the transfer down on your surface, rub it with your transfer tool, and then just because there's a gilded transfer underneath, I am a little bit more careful when I'm peeling back my transfer sheet just to make sure that none of that gilded transfer comes up. But if you have burnished it well with your fingertips, you shouldn't have any problems at all. And so I'm going to apply the outside transfers that I have for the outside area of my wood round in the exact same fashion. I'm going to lay that transfer down, remove the backing of the transfer sheet, and then rub it with my transfer tool to get everything attached to my wood round. Now that my transfers are all applied to my wood round, it's time to seal this project in. And for that, I'm going to be using Sweet Pickins Dark Oil Wax. I really wanted to highlight the outside of the wood round with where I distressed it with some dark oil wax. And so I'm going to take my little sponge dauber and I'm going to apply the oil wax over the entire board. I'm going to start with the top and the sides. I'm going to apply the wax, and then once I remove the wax from the top and the sides, then I will do the back side of the wood round as well. And with the oil wax, I like to apply it and I like to set it aside for about 15 minutes to really let that oil wax absorb into the paint. Once it sets aside for 15 minutes, then I'm just going to take a dry paper towel and wipe off all of the excess wax, and you can see the beautiful finish and sheen that this wax leaves behind on this wood round. And now that the wax is all removed, then this project is complete. For project 4, I'm going to be making over this picture frame, and I actually got this frame out of a free box at a garage sale. So I'm going to take all the components of the frame apart, I'm going to clean it up well, and then we're going to start by painting the outside of the frame. And the color that I chose for this frame is Dixie Belle's in the navy chalk paint. And so I'm going to give the frame 2 good coats of the chalk paint. I'm going to do the top and the back side, as well as the inside and outside rim of the frame. I'm going to let it dry completely in between each coat, and then once that's dry, then we'll move on to the next step in this makeover. I needed a piece of cardboard for my frame makeover, and so I just cut out a piece of scrap from the back side of an IOD transfer set. And now I'm going to give this piece of cardboard 2 good coats of Dixie Belle Ecru chalk paint. I'm going to be stamping on this and applying a transfer, so I wanted a nice sturdy backdrop for that. So I'm going to give this piece of cardboard the 2 coats of paint, let it dry completely, and then we'll move on to the next step. I'm going to be stamping my cardboard piece with the brand new IOD, the Waltz stamp. And I'm also going to be using some China Blue ink from IOD. And because this stamp is brand new and has never been used before, you want to take a piece of sandpaper and just kind of rough up the back of your stamp to season it a little bit to make sure that it will grab your ink nicely. You only have to do this the first time before you use it. And now I'm just taking my China Blue ink and I'm stamping it on my stamp, and then I'm going to take the stamp and apply it to my painted piece of cardboard. And when I do a stamp on any surface, I kind of hold the stamp down with one hand and then use my other hand to kind of rub everything in place. And then I will lift up the stamp, and you'll see that we have a beautifully stamped backdrop for the rest of our project. And then for cleaning my stamps, I always just use a wet paper towel or a baby wipe, and you want to wipe off that wet ink right away so it doesn't dry to your stamp. So my frame needs to be sealed in, and for that I'm just going to be using my Dixie Belle satin top coat, and I'm going to give the entire painted surface of the frame just 1 good coat of this top coat to seal everything in nicely. And then we'll put that aside and let that completely dry. Now I'm going to apply a transfer on top of my stamped backdrop, and for that I'm going to be using a transfer from the brand new IOD Menagerie transfer set, and I already cut out this transfer of these beautiful birds, and I'm going to apply it to my piece of cardboard. And so I'm just going to lay the transfer down where I want it on my cardboard, and then I'm going to use my transfer tool, rub over the entire transfer, and then start from one side, move to the next, as I slowly peel up the transfer while I'm still rubbing with the transfer tool. And then once I have that transfer completely attached to my backdrop, then I'm going to take my hand and my transfer vellum rub it over the birds, burnish it in just to make sure that I don't have any bubbles or wrinkles in my transfer. Now, because this piece is going to be behind glass in a frame, you wouldn't necessarily have to seal it in, but I'm going to seal it in anyway, and I'm going to be using my Dixie Belle clear coat in the satin finish, and I'm just going to give this one good coat of top coat over the entire surface of the cardboard. And I'm going to let that completely dry, and once that's dry, then it's time to put our entire frame back together. Everything has completely dried, and now it's time to put everything back together. I cleaned the glass really well, and now I'm putting my image back in there and all the components to the frame, and then adding the back of the frame, and then this project is complete. Thank you so much for watching today's video. All the new IOD Summer 2025 products I used today are available now on my website, thevintagehenandchick.com. Just check the link below in the description box. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and come back next week for more Trash to Treasure DIY inspiration.